The ship came down through the clouds on a Tuesday morning. It was silver and shaped like a teardrop. The people of New York City stopped in the streets and looked up at the sky. Some ran, some screamed. Most just stood there with their phones out, recording everything. The ship landed in Central Park. It crushed several trees and left a deep mark in the grass. For 3 hours, nothing happened. The military came. The police set up barriers. News helicopters flew in circles overhead. The whole world watched on television and waited. Then the door opened. The creature that stepped out was tall and thin. It had gray skin and large black eyes. Its arms were long and its fingers had 6 joints each. It wore a silver robe that matched its ship. Behind it came 2 more creatures that looked similar but smaller. The tall one raised its hands and spoke. Its voice was strange, like metal scraping against glass, but somehow everyone could understand the words. "We come in peace. We need to speak with your leaders, please. We are desperate." That was how it started. That was the day everything changed for humanity and for the galaxy. General Sarah Mitchell was the first military officer to meet with the aliens. She was 52 years old with gray hair cut short. She had fought in 3 wars and had seen many strange things in her life, but nothing had prepared her for this. The aliens called themselves Their leader was named. He sat across from General Mitchell in a large tent that had been set up near the landing site. His black eyes showed no emotion, but his long fingers kept moving nervously. "You must understand," said. "We did not come here by choice. We came here because we had no other option. We came here because we are dying." General Mitchell leaned forward. "Tell me everything." And so told his story. They were part of a great alliance of alien species. This alliance was called the Galactic Council. For 10,000 years, the Council had kept peace among hundreds of worlds. Different species worked together, traded together, and lived together in harmony. But 5 years ago, everything changed. A new enemy appeared from the dark space between galaxies. They called themselves No one knew where they came from. No one knew what they wanted. They did not talk. They did not negotiate. They only destroyed. They were like a plague. They swept through star system after star system. Their ships were black and covered with sharp points. Their weapons were more powerful than anything the Council had ever seen. In 5 years, they had destroyed 47 worlds. Billions of lives had been lost. "We have tried everything," said. His voice was heavy with sadness. "We have sent our best fleets. We have used our most advanced weapons. Nothing works. They adapt to everything we do. They learn our tactics and then defeat us. We are losing this war, General. In 1 year, maybe 2, the Council will fall. Every species in the Alliance will be destroyed." General Mitchell listened carefully. She had many questions. "If you have such advanced technology, why come to us? Earth has only been exploring space for a few decades. We are nothing compared to your alliance." Made a sound that might have been a sigh. "That is what we thought too. But then we heard stories. Strange stories about your species. Stories that made us wonder if perhaps we were wrong about you." "What kind of stories?" "Stories about your history, your wars, your survival." Leaned closer. "We studied your planet from afar. We looked at your past. What we found confused us greatly." General Mitchell waited for him to continue. "Your species is only 200,000 years old," said. "In galactic terms, you are infants, but in that short time you have faced extinction many times. Ice ages, plagues, wars that killed millions, natural disasters. Again and again, death came for your species, and again you survived." "That is just our history," Mitchell said. "Every species must face challenges." Shook his head slowly. "No, General, you do not understand. They have existed for 3 million years. In that time we have faced perhaps 5 serious threats to our survival. 5 in 3 million years. Your species has faced hundreds in just 200,000 years. And yet here you are, still alive, still growing, still reaching for the stars." He paused, and his black eyes looked directly into hers. "We came to ask you one question, General. How do you survive? What is your secret? Because whatever it is, we need it. The Galactic Council needs it, or we will all die." General Mitchell sat back in her chair. She thought about everything she had heard. She thought about human history, the wars, the disasters, the times when it seemed like everything was lost. And she thought about how humanity had always found a way to keep going. "I need to speak with my government," she said finally. "This is not a decision I can make alone, but I want you to know something, Ambassador. Whatever we decide, I am glad you came to us. I am glad someone finally asked for our help." The next few weeks were chaos. Every government on Earth argued about what to do. Some wanted to hide and protect themselves. Others wanted to help the aliens. Some did not believe the story at all. But in the end, the decision was made. Earth would help Earth would join the fight against The aliens were pleased but also confused. They had expected Earth to offer weapons. They had expected new ships and new technology. Instead, the humans offered something different. "Advisors," said the word like it tasted bad in his mouth. "You are sending us advisors." General Mitchell nodded. She stood in front of a screen that showed a list of names and faces. "These are our best: soldiers, strategists, experts in warfare. They will come to your front lines and help you fight." "But we do not need teachers," protested. "We have been fighting wars for millions of years. We need weapons, we need ships, we need firepower." "You said you tried all that," Mitchell replied calmly. "You said nothing worked. They adapt to everything you throw at them. So maybe it is time to try something new. Maybe it is time to learn how humans fight." Was not happy. Neither were the other members of the Galactic Council when they heard the news. They had hoped for a miracle weapon. Instead, they were getting a few hundred humans with no special technology at all. But they were desperate. They had no other choice, so they accepted the offer. The first group of human advisors left Earth 3 weeks later. There were 150 of them, soldiers from every country, veterans of every conflict, men and women who had spent their lives studying war. Leading them was Colonel James Drake. He was 45 years old with dark skin and eyes that had seen too much death. He had fought in mountains and deserts and jungles. He had been shot twice and stabbed once. He walked with a slight limp from an old injury that never healed right. When the transport ship left Earth's atmosphere, Drake looked out the window at the blue planet below. He wondered if he would ever see it again. Then he turned away and focused on the mission ahead. The journey to the front lines took 2 weeks. The human advisors traveled on a ship called the Bright Hope. It was a beautiful ship, all smooth curves and soft lights. Everything was clean and efficient. Everything worked perfectly. Drake noticed that the crew moved in very organized ways. They followed schedules exactly. They performed their duties the same way every time. There was no variation, no creativity, no surprises. He also noticed that they seemed afraid, not of the humans, but of the war they were flying toward. The fear showed in the way they moved, in the way they spoke to each other in quiet voices, in the way they avoided talking about what was waiting for them. One night, Drake sat in the ship's observation deck. He was looking at the stars when a young officer approached him. The officer's name he was small for his species and seemed curious about the humans. "May I ask you something, Colonel?" said. Drake nodded. "Go ahead." "Why did you come? You could have stayed safe on your planet. They do not know Earth exists. You could have hidden and survived. Why risk everything to help us?" Drake thought about the question for a long moment. Then he smiled slightly. "Let me tell you a story," he said. "A long time ago on Earth there was a great war, the biggest war in our history. Millions of people died. Cities were destroyed. It seemed like the whole world was burning." Listened with wide eyes. In that war there was a time when one country stood alone against an enemy that had conquered everything else. Everyone said that country would fall. The enemy was too strong. There was no hope, but the leader of that country gave a speech. He said they would never give up. They would fight on the beaches. They would fight in the streets. They would never surrender. Drake looked out at the stars. That country survived. They won the war because they refused to accept that it was hopeless. They refused to give up even when giving up made sense. He turned to look at. That is why we came, because giving up is not in our nature, because when we see someone in trouble we help, even if it is dangerous, even if it seems impossible. That is who we are. That is what makes us human. Was silent for a long moment. Then he asked another question. Is that your weapon, the one the council hopes you will share with us, this refusal to give up? Drake laughed softly. Maybe it is, but I think it is more than that. I think our real weapon is something else, something I cannot explain with words. You will have to see it for yourself. The ship arrived at the front lines 5 days later. The first thing Drake saw was destruction. The space around them was filled with broken ships and floating debris, the remains of a great battle, the remains of a defeat. The second thing he saw was fear. The soldiers at the forward base looked broken. They moved slowly. They spoke in whispers. They had the eyes of people who had given up hope. Commander was in charge of the base. She was tall with a scar running across her face. She had fought for 3 years and had lost almost everything. Welcome to the edge of extinction, she said when she met Drake. There was no warmth in her voice, only exhaustion. I hope you brought a miracle, Colonel, because that is what we need. Drake looked around at the base, at the tired soldiers, at the damaged equipment, at the screens showing the positions of enemy ships. No miracles, he said. Just new ideas. Show me everything. Show me how you fight. Show me how you lose. And then maybe I can show you how to win. Made a sound of disbelief. You think you can teach us how to fight? We have been warriors for millions of years. What can humans possibly know that we do not? Drake met her eyes without looking away. You said you keep losing. You said the enemy adapts to everything you do. That tells me one thing. You fight the same way every time. You follow the rules. You do what makes sense. You do what is logical. He stepped closer to her. They expect that. They have learned your patterns. They know what you will do before you do it. That is why they keep winning. Frowned, then what do you suggest? Fight without logic. That is madness. Drake smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf. Exactly, he said. Madness, unpredictability, doing the thing that makes no sense, doing the thing your enemy cannot expect because no sane being would ever do it. That is how humans fight. That is how we survive. And that is what I am going to teach you. Stared at him for a long moment. Then something changed in her eyes. It was small, just a tiny spark. But Drake had seen that spark before. It was the first light of hope in someone who had forgotten what hope felt like. Very well, Colonel, she said quietly. Show us this madness of yours. Show us how humans fight. Drake nodded. He turned to his team and gave a signal. The other human advisors spread out through the base, already starting their work, already beginning to teach, already planting the seeds of something new. The real war was about to begin. Not a war of ships and weapons, a war of ideas, a war of minds, a war that would show the galaxy what humanity was truly capable of. In the darkness of space, they were waiting. They did not know it yet, but they were about to face something they had never encountered before, something more dangerous than any weapon. They were about to face humanity at war. And nothing in the universe would ever be the same again. The first lesson began the next morning. Drake gathered all the officers in a large room. He stood at the front with a screen behind him showing the latest battle reports. Tell me about your last engagement, he said. Tell me exactly what happened. Commander stepped forward. The fleet appeared at the edge of the system. They had 47 ships. We had 52. We formed standard defensive positions and engaged at optimal range. Standard defensive positions, Drake repeated. What does that mean exactly? Our ships formed a crescent pattern facing the enemy. This allows maximum overlapping fire coverage and protects the command vessels in the center. It is the most efficient defensive formation. Drake nodded slowly. And what did they do? They split their fleet into 3 groups and attacked from multiple angles. They focused their fire on specific points in our formation. They broke through and destroyed 17 of our ships before we could retreat. Did they seem surprised by your formation? Looked confused by the question. No, why would they be surprised? It is the most logical choice for our situation. Drake turned to the screen and brought up a diagram. This is the problem. You always make the most logical choice. Know this. They have fought you for 5 years. They know exactly what you will do in any situation because you always do the logical thing. He changed the diagram to show something different. On Earth, we have a saying. The best way to win a fight is to make your enemy think you will go left, then go right. Make them think you are weak, then show your strength. Make them think you are running away, then turn and attack. One of the officers raised a hand. But that would be deception. That would be lying about your intentions. Yes, Drake said. That is exactly what it is. We call it strategy. The room fell silent. They looked at each other with uncertainty in their eyes. The concept seemed to disturb them deeply. Drake understood. They were an honest species. They valued truth and logic above all things. The idea of deception was uncomfortable for them, maybe even shameful. But war was not comfortable. War was not logical. And if they wanted to survive, they would have to learn some uncomfortable lessons. Let me show you something, Drake said. He brought up another image on the screen. It showed a human historical battle, ships on an ocean long ago. This happened on Earth hundreds of years ago. 2 fleets were fighting. One fleet was larger and stronger. They should have won easily. But the smaller fleet did something unexpected. They attacked at night when everyone was supposed to be sleeping. They used fire ships, boats filled with flames, and sent them crashing into the enemy. The larger fleet panicked and scattered. The smaller fleet won. He looked around the room. The commanders of that smaller fleet did not win because they had better ships or more soldiers. They won because they did something their enemy did not expect. They changed the rules of the fight. Commander spoke up. You want us to fight without honor. Drake shook his head. I want you to fight to win. I want you to survive. Honor means nothing if your species is extinct. The dead do not care about rules. The words hung in the air, heavy, uncomfortable, true. Drake turned off the screen. He looked at the officers one by one. Tomorrow we begin training. I will teach you how to think like humans, how to expect the unexpected, how to become unpredictable. It will be hard. It will feel wrong. But if you want to beat it is the only way. He paused at the door. The universe is not fair. The universe does not reward the logical or the honorable. The universe rewards those who survive, and survival is what humans do best. Then he left the room to let them think about his words. The first lesson was finished. The real work was just beginning. The training began at dawn. Drake gathered 50 soldiers in a large, empty cargo bay. The humans had cleared out all the equipment and painted lines on the floor. They looked confused. They had expected weapons training or tactical simulations. Instead, they were standing in an empty room. Today we play a game, Drake announced. It is called Capture the Flag. They looked at each other. A game? They were fighting for survival. They did not have time for games. Drake held up 2 pieces of cloth. One was red, one was blue. You will split into 2 teams. Each team has a flag. The goal is simple. Protect your flag and capture the enemy flag. The team that captures the other flag first wins. This seems childish, said one of the officers. His name was, and he was one of the highest-ranking warriors in the base. How does this help us fight the? Drake smiled. That is exactly what I want you to learn. This game teaches you to think differently, to adapt, to improvise. There are no standard tactics for this game. You must create your own. He threw the flags to two, who stood on opposite sides of the room. Begin. What happened next was exactly what Drake expected. The formed neat lines. They moved forward in organized groups. They tried to protect their flag with half their forces while attacking with the other half. Everything was efficient. Everything was logical. And everything went wrong. The red team pushed forward with perfect discipline. The blue team met them in the middle. The two groups collided and struggled against each other. Neither side could gain an advantage. Meanwhile, both flags sat unguarded at the back of the room. After 20 minutes of fighting with no result, Drake called for a stop. "What did you learn?" he asked. Stepped forward. He was breathing hard from the exercise. The game has no clear solution. Both teams are equal in strength. Neither can win without losing their own flag. "Wrong," Drake said. "Both teams can win. You are just not thinking correctly." He walked to the center of the room. You formed two lines and pushed against each other. You matched strength against strength. That is what you always do. That is what they expect you to do. But what if you did something different? He turned to face the blue team. What if, instead of fighting directly, you sent one small group around the side while the rest pretended to attack? What if you made the enemy think you were weak in one area, then struck somewhere else? What if you sacrificed some of your defenders to create a distraction while others grabbed the flag? They looked confused and troubled. "That would be deceptive," said slowly. "Yes, and it would work." They played the game again. This time Drake gave each team a human advisor. The advisors did not give orders. They only made suggestions, small ideas that changed everything. The red team sent 3 soldiers crawling along the walls while the others charged forward. The blue team did not notice until it was too late. The red team won in 5 minutes. The blue team learned from their defeat. The next round, they kept some soldiers hidden in the back, waiting to ambush anyone who tried to sneak through. They set a trap and caught the red team's runners. Round after round, they learned. They started to think differently. They started to expect tricks and began creating their own. By the end of the day, the games had become complex battles of deception and surprise. They were laughing and arguing and planning. The fear in their eyes had been replaced by something else. Commander watched from the doorway. She had not participated in the training. She had just observed. Now she approached Drake with a strange expression on her face. "I have never seen my soldiers like this," she said quietly. "They are enjoying themselves. In the middle of a war, they are having fun." Drake nodded. "That is important too. A soldier who enjoys fighting is a soldier who fights well. Fear makes you hesitate. Joy makes you bold." Was silent for a moment. Then she asked, "Do you really think this will work? These tricks and deceptions, they are not playing games, they are killing us." "The principles are the same," Drake said. "Today we played with flags. Tomorrow we play with ships. They expect you to fight logically. When you stop being logical, they will not know what to do." "You sound very certain." Drake looked at her directly. "I have fought many enemies in my life. Some were stronger than me, some were smarter, some had better weapons, but I am still alive and they are not. Do you know why?" Shook her head. "Because I never fought fair. I never did what they expected. I always found a way to change the game. And that is what we are going to teach your people to do." The training continued for 3 weeks. Every day brought new lessons. The humans taught them about ambushes and traps. They taught them about feints and false retreats. They taught them about psychological warfare, making the enemy afraid before the battle even started. Some lessons were simple. How to hide the true number of your forces. How to make a small group look like a large army. How to spread false information that would reach enemy ears. Other lessons were more complex. how to identify patterns in enemy behavior and use those patterns against them, how to create situations where the enemy would make predictable choices, then punish them for those choices. The hardest lesson was about sacrifice. They believed in protecting every soldier. They would never willingly send someone into danger if there was any other option, but war sometimes required sacrifice. Sometimes you had to lose a small battle to win a larger war. Drake gathered the officers one night to explain this concept. He told them about a human battle from long ago where a small group of soldiers held a narrow pass against an enormous army. They knew they would die. They went anyway. Their sacrifice gave their allies time to prepare and eventually win the war. 300 warriors held back thousands, Drake said. They all died, but their deaths meant victory for everyone else. They were troubled by this story. The idea of deliberately sacrificing soldiers went against everything they believed. How do you ask someone to die for a plan? Asked. How do you look them in the eyes and tell them they will not survive? Drake's face grew serious. You tell them the truth. You tell them why it matters, and then you let them choose. In my experience, when the cause is worthy and the need is real, humans step forward. They volunteer. They sacrifice themselves so others can live. Do all humans think this way? No, not all, but enough. Enough that when the moment comes, someone is always willing to stand in the fire so others can escape. Was quiet for a long moment, then he spoke slowly. Among my people we call such willingness the death wish. It is considered a sickness, a failure of logical thinking. We try to cure it. Among my people, Drake replied, we call it courage. We build statues to honor it. The training changed Drake could see it in the way they moved. They stood. They spoke louder. The despair that had covered them like a heavy blanket was lifting. Hope was returning. But hope was not enough. They needed a victory. They needed to prove that the new tactics actually worked against them. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Scout ships reported a small patrol entering the system. 5 ships, not a major threat but enough to cause damage. In the past, they would have formed defensive positions and waited for the attack. This time, Drake suggested something different. Let us go to them, he said during the strategy meeting. Let us attack before they expect it. Commander studied the tactical display. The ships were still far away, moving slowly through the outer system. They seemed to be searching for something. Attack them. We do not know their full strength. There could be more ships hiding nearby. There could be, Drake agreed. Or there could not be. They have never seen you attack first. They expect you to run and hide. What will they think when you charge toward them? One of the captains spoke up, a young officer named. They will think we have gone crazy. Exactly, Drake said with a grin, and crazy is hard to predict. The plan was simple but unconventional. 3 ships would fly directly toward the patrol. They would look like they were attacking recklessly, without support. They would naturally move to destroy them. But hidden behind a small moon, 5 more ships would be waiting. When they committed to the attack, the hidden ships would emerge and catch them from behind. It is a trap, said slowly. We are setting a trap for them. A basic one, Drake admitted. But they have never seen you use traps before. They will not expect it. Made her decision. We do this. Captain, you will lead the forward group. Make them believe you are panicking. Make them believe you are making a mistake. Then lead them into the trap. Nodded, there was no fear in his eyes, only determination. I understand, Commander, we will not fail. The battle happened 2 days later. Drake watched from the command center as the ships moved into position. His heart was beating fast. Everything he had taught them was about to be tested. 3 ships flew toward the patrol. They moved quickly, almost recklessly. No formation, no organization, just 3 ships rushing toward the enemy. They responded exactly as predicted. Their 5 ships turned and accelerated. They saw weak prey running toward them. They saw an easy kill. "They are taking the bait," said. Her voice was tight with tension. "All 5 ships are pursuing." Drake watched the display. They were fast. They were closing the distance quickly. Ships turned and began to retreat, still looking panicked and disorganized. "Steady," Drake said quietly. "Keep them coming." They followed. They were completely focused on the fleeing ships. They did not see the 5 vessels emerge from behind the moon. They did not see them until it was too late. The ambush was devastating. The hidden ships fired at point-blank range into the rear of the formation. 2 enemy ships exploded instantly. A third was crippled and drifted helplessly. The remaining 2 tried to turn and fight, but now they were surrounded. Ships had stopped retreating and were attacking from the front. In 3 minutes it was over. All 5 ships were destroyed. They had lost nothing. The command center erupted in cheers. Officers were hugging each other and shouting. Some were crying. They had won. For the first time in years, they had won a battle against the commander. Stood very still. She stared at the display showing the debris of the enemy ships. Then she turned to Drake. "They never saw it coming," she said softly. "They flew right into the trap." "That is how it works," Drake replied. "Make them see what you want them to see. Make them think what you want them to think. Control their expectations and you control the battle." Nodded slowly. Something had changed in her eyes. The last traces of doubt were gone. She believed now. She understood. "We need to do this again," she said. "We need more victories. We need to show the Council that humans really do have something to teach us." "That was always the plan," Drake said. "One battle proves nothing. A pattern of victories changes everything." Over the next month, they won 7 more engagements. Each one was different. Each one used new tactics. They were confused. Their enemy had changed. The predictable prey had become dangerous hunters. News of the victories spread quickly through the Galactic Council. Other species began to ask questions. Who were these humans? What were they teaching the? How were they winning? Ambassadors sent a message to Earth. "Whatever you are doing, it is working. Send more advisors. Send as many as you can." Earth responded. 300 more human advisors were dispatched to various fronts. Soldiers, tacticians, and strategists spread throughout the Council's forces. They brought the same lessons Drake had taught. They planted the same seeds. But they were not stupid. They noticed the change. They began to study their new enemy. They captured prisoners and asked questions. They analyzed the new tactics and searched for patterns. Drake knew this was coming. He warned the "Enjoy these victories, but do not become overconfident. They will adapt. They will learn our tricks. When that happens, we will need new ones." Understood. So we must always keep changing, always stay one step ahead. Exactly. The moment you become predictable is the moment you start losing again. She looked at him with her alien eyes that he had learned to read. There was respect there now, and something else, something like friendship. "When this war began, I thought we were doomed. I thought we had no chance against the. Now I think differently. Now I believe we can win." "Why?" Drake asked. "Because of you, because of your people. You have shown us that strength is not just about weapons and ships. It is about thinking. It is about creativity. It is about refusing to accept defeat." She paused. "You have given us something we lost long ago, something we did not even know we were missing." "What is that?" "Hope," said simply. "Real hope. Not the desperate hope of those who have nothing else, but the confident hope of those who have found a new path." Drake looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there they were regrouping, planning, learning. The war was far from over. The real challenges were still to come. But was right. Something had changed. The Council species were no longer passive victims waiting to be destroyed. They were fighting back. They were learning to think like humans, and that made them dangerous. "They have never faced anything like this," Drake said. "They have conquered hundreds of worlds because those worlds fought in predictable ways. They have never met a species that refuses to play by the rules." And now they have met humanity, said. Now they have met humanity, Drake agreed, and they have no idea what they are dealing with. The first human advisor to die was Sergeant Maria Santos. She was 34 years old from Brazil. She had been teaching a group of pilots new evasion techniques when a raiding party attacked the training facility. Santos did not run. She stayed with her students and helped them reach the escape ships. She held off long enough for 30 to evacuate. Then her position was overrun. When Drake heard the news, he felt the familiar weight of loss settle in his chest. He had known Santos for 10 years. She had been a good soldier and a better person. But he did not have time to mourn. They had attacked a training facility. That meant they knew about the advisors. They were targeting the humans specifically. They understand, Drake told. They know we are the ones changing things. They will try to kill us all. Looked worried. Should we move the advisors somewhere safer? Drake shook his head. That would mean hiding. That would mean fear. My people do not hide. We do what Santos did. We stay and we fight and we show your people what courage looks like. They held a ceremony for Santos. It was the first time they had honored a human in one of their sacred rituals. They spoke of her bravery. They spoke of her sacrifice. They added her name to their list of honored dead. Drake stood at the ceremony and watched them pay their respects. He thought about what Santos had done. She had died protecting people she barely knew, aliens from another world. She had given her life for them without hesitation. That was the human weapon, he realized, not tactics or strategies. Those were just tools. The real weapon was the human spirit, the willingness to sacrifice, the refusal to abandon others, the stubborn determination to keep fighting no matter what. They could not understand that. They conquered through fear and power. They had never met a species that was not afraid to die. Drake made a silent promise to Santos and to all the humans who would fall in this war. Their deaths would matter. Their sacrifices would be remembered. And in the end, their spirit would be the thing that destroyed the enemy. The war had truly begun. The easy victories were over. The real test was coming. And humanity was ready to show the galaxy what it meant to never give up. The counterattack came 3 months after the first human victories. It was larger than anything the Galactic Council had seen before. 2,000 ships emerged from dark space and swept through 3 systems in a single day. The devastation was terrible. Colonies that had stood for centuries were burned to ash. Billions of lives were lost. The hope that had been growing among the Council species turned to fresh terror. Drake received the news on the command ship Eternal Light. He stood in the tactical center, surrounded by officers who looked just as shocked as he felt. The display showed the enemy advance as a wave of red dots sweeping across the map. "They are sending everything," Commander said. Her voice was hollow. "This is not a raid. This is an invasion. They mean to end the war now." Drake studied the patterns of the attack. They were moving differently than before. Their formations were strange, unpredictable. They were not following their usual tactics. "They learned," he said quietly. "They watched what we did and they learned from it." "What do you mean?" "Look at their movements." Drake pointed to the display. "No patterns, no standard formations. They are doing what we taught you to do. They are being unpredictable." The room fell silent. They understood what this meant. The advantage they had gained was gone. They had adapted to human tactics and were now using similar methods against them. "Then we have failed," one officer said. "They have beaten us again." "No," Drake's voice was sharp. "We have not failed. They have learned to copy our tricks. That does not mean they have learned to think like us." "What is the difference?" Drake turned to face the room. His eyes were hard but not hopeless. "Anyone can learn to set a trap. Anyone can learn to use deception. But there is something else, something deeper, something they cannot copy because they do not understand it." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "You asked me once what humanity's real weapon is. I told you that you would have to see it for yourself. Now is the time. Watch what happens next and you will understand. The human advisors were scattered across the war front when they attacked. Some were with fleets. Some were at ground bases. Some were on worlds that fell within hours. The reports that came back told the same story. When they came, the humans did not run. They stayed and fought. They organized defenses. They held positions that should have been impossible to hold. They bought time for others to escape. Lieutenant Jake held a communication station on Prime for 11 hours. His team of 8 humans and 40 fought wave after wave of soldiers. They were outnumbered 20 to 1. They should have died in the first hour. But did not think about odds. He thought about the refugees fleeing the city behind him. 50,000 civilians trying to reach the evacuation ships. He told his team that they would hold until the last ship left. Then they would hold longer. When the rescue ships finally arrived, and 3 of his humans were still alive, they had held the station for 11 hours. 40,000 refugees had escaped because of them. On the colony world of, Captain Sarah organized a guerrilla resistance that lasted for 3 weeks. They controlled the cities but owned the wilderness. She struck at night. She destroyed supply lines. She freed prisoners. She made the enemy afraid to leave their bases. They sent 10,000 soldiers to find her. She had only 200 fighters, humans and together. She lost them all eventually, but not before killing 4,000 of the enemy and forcing them to divert resources from the main invasion. Story after story came in. Humans fighting impossible battles. Humans refusing to surrender even when surrender was the logical choice. Humans inspiring the aliens around them to do the same. Commander read these reports with growing amazement. She came to Drake one night with confusion in her eyes. "I do not understand," she said. "Your people are dying. These battles they fight they cannot win. They must know this. Why do they keep fighting?" Drake was sitting alone, looking at a list of names. Humans who had died that week. Friends he would never see again. "Because that is who we are," he said simply. "We do not fight because we know we will win. We fight because fighting is the right thing to do. We fight because giving up is not in our nature. But there is no logic in dying for a battle you cannot win." Drake looked up at her. His eyes were tired but still burning with something she did not have a word for. "Let me tell you something, Commander. In all of human history we have faced extinction many times. Ice ages that should have frozen us all. Plagues that killed half our population. Wars where we nearly destroyed ourselves. Every time we survived. Do you know how?" Shook her head. "Because somewhere, someone refused to accept that it was over. Someone stood up when everyone else sat down. Someone kept fighting when everyone else surrendered. That spirit, that stubborn refusal to die quietly, that is what makes us human." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. "They can copy our tactics, they can learn our tricks, but they cannot copy this. They cannot learn what makes someone fight when fighting makes no sense, because it is not a strategy, it is not a technique, it is something in our souls." "Souls," repeated the word carefully. "We do not have a translation for this word. It means the deepest part of who you are, the part that does not think, only feels, the part that tells you to protect your loved ones even if it kills you, the part that would rather die free than live as a slave." Drake turned back to face her. "They have conquered 1,000 species by being stronger and smarter. They have never met a species that would rather die than surrender. They do not know what to do with that. And that confusion, that hesitation, that is where we will beat them." The turning point came at the Battle of Station. It was supposed to be a simple evacuation. The station had been cut off by the advance. 15,000 civilians were trapped. The Council sent a rescue fleet of 30 ships to get them out. They sent 100 ships to stop them. Drake was on the flagship Unity when they arrived at. The situation was hopeless. They were outnumbered more than 3 to 1. The standard response would be to retreat and abandon the station. "We have to try," Drake said to the fleet commander, "Admiral. Those people are counting on us." "We will all die," replied. "The mathematics are clear. We cannot defeat 100 ships with 30. Then we do not try to defeat them. We try to save the civilians. Some of our ships distract the enemy while others evacuate the station. That is suicide for the ships providing the distraction." Drake nodded. "Yes, it is, but it gives the others a chance." Admiral was silent for a long moment. He was a who had commanded fleets for 200 years. He had never lost a battle because he had never fought one he could not win. "You are asking me to sacrifice my crews for strangers," he said finally. "I am asking you to give some of your crews the choice to sacrifice themselves for strangers. There is a difference." Drake activated the ship-wide communication system. His voice carried to every vessel in the fleet. "This is Colonel James Drake of Earth. You all know the situation. We are outnumbered. If we fight this battle the normal way, we will lose. But there are 15,000 people on that station waiting for us. Civilians, families, children." He paused, feeling the weight of what he was about to say. "I need volunteers. Ships willing to engage the fleet directly and hold them in place while the others evacuate the station. I will not lie to you. This mission will probably be fatal for those who take it, but it will give everyone else a chance to live." Silence. Then a voice came through the communication system. "This is Captain of the Bright Horizon. My crew volunteers." Another voice. "This is Commander of the Stellar Dawn. We volunteer." More voices, one after another, officers stepping forward to accept certain death. In the end, 12 ships volunteered, nearly half the fleet. Admiral stared at the display showing the names of the volunteers. His long fingers trembled slightly. "Why?" he whispered. "Why would they do this?" Drake felt a fierce pride burning in his chest. "Because you taught them well, Admiral. Because they learned that some things are worth dying for." The battle began an hour later. The 12 volunteer ships charged directly at the fleet. They flew in wild patterns, impossible to predict. They fired at random targets, spreading chaos rather than trying to achieve tactical objectives. They were confused. This attack made no sense. Why would a small group charge a larger force with no hope of victory? They suspected a trap. They hesitated. That hesitation was all the other ships needed. While they focused on the attacking vessels, 18 ships raced toward station. They began loading civilians as fast as they could. Captain led the charge. His ship was small and fast. He flew directly at the largest vessel, a command ship nearly 10 times his size. His weapons were doing no real damage. That was not the point. The point was to keep their attention. The point was to make them focus on him instead of the evacuation. His ship was hit 17 times in the first 5 minutes. Systems failed one after another. Half his crew was dead. He kept flying. Drake's voice came through the communication system. "The evacuation is half complete. Hold them a little longer." "Understood, Colonel." His voice was calm despite everything. "We will hold." More ships fell. The Bright Horizon exploded in a ball of fire. The Stellar Dawn was torn apart by concentrated fire. One by one, the volunteer ships were destroyed. But they did their job. They held long enough. The last transport left station with the final group of civilians just as the 8th volunteer ship was destroyed. The remaining 4 ships immediately retreated at maximum speed. They tried to pursue, but they were scattered and disorganized from the chaotic battle. 15,000 civilians were saved. 12 ships and their crews were lost. When it was over, Admiral sat in his command chair and wept. Tears rolled down his gray alien face. He did not try to hide them. "They sacrificed themselves," he said. "They died so strangers could live. How do you teach that, Colonel? How do you put that into a training program?" Drake sat beside him. He felt empty, hollow. The victory had cost so much. You cannot teach it, he said quietly. You can only show it. You can only demonstrate what courage looks like and hope others find it in themselves. They will not understand this. They will think we were foolish to sacrifice trained crews for common civilians. Yes, they will think that, and that is exactly why they will lose in the end. Looked at him. You really believe that, after today, after all the death? Drake thought about Captain flying directly at a ship that could destroy him instantly. He thought about Commander ordering his crew to hold the line when escape was still possible. He thought about all the humans and who had chosen to die so others could live. I believe it more than ever, he said, because today I saw something that we'll never see. I saw courage that made no logical sense. I saw sacrifice that served no strategic purpose. I saw people choosing to be heroes because it was the right thing to do, not because it would help them win. He stood and looked out at the stars, where the debris of 12 ships still floated. The fight to conquer, we fight to protect. The sacrifice others to achieve their goals, we sacrifice ourselves to save others. The sea war as a contest of strength, we see it as a test of character. He turned back to, they will never understand us, and what they cannot understand they cannot defeat. News of the battle spread quickly through the Galactic Council. The story of the 12 ships became a legend. Songs were written. Memorials were built. Species who had never cared about the war suddenly began paying attention. More importantly, the story inspired others. Across the war front, Council soldiers began fighting with new determination. They had seen what was possible when fear was replaced by courage. They wanted to be worthy of that example. They noticed the change. Their advance slowed. Their easy victories became harder. The enemy they had been conquering for 5 years was suddenly fighting back with fierce determination. Drake received a message from Ambassador. The Council wants to know your secret. How did you turn a defeat into an inspiration? How did you make our people willing to die for each other? Drake thought about the question for a long time before answering. There is no secret, he wrote back. Only a truth that all species eventually learn. The strongest weapon in any war is not technology or tactics. It is the willingness to fight for something greater than yourself. That willingness cannot be manufactured. It can only be inspired. And inspiration comes from example. Show people what courage looks like and they will find courage in themselves. He sent the message and returned to his work. The war was far from over. They were still strong. Many more would die before it was finished. But something had changed. The hopelessness that had gripped the Council was gone. In its place was determination, will, the fierce stubbornness that refused to accept defeat. Humanity had given the galaxy something more valuable than weapons or ships. They had given them something to believe in, something worth fighting for. And that, Drake knew, was the beginning of the end for the. They had started a war thinking they were fighting against weakness. Now they were learning the terrible truth. They were fighting against hope itself. And hope, in the hands of those willing to die for it, was unstoppable. 6 months after the battle Drake stood before the full Galactic Council. The chamber was enormous, designed to hold representatives from hundreds of species. Today it was packed with aliens of every shape and size, all staring at the lone human in the center of the room. Ambassador introduced him. This is Colonel James Drake of Earth. He has been leading our human advisors since they first arrived. The Council has asked him to present his assessment of the war. Drake looked around the chamber. He saw hope in some eyes, fear in others, doubt in many. These beings controlled the fate of countless worlds. They needed to understand what he was about to tell them. "They can be beaten," he began. His voice echoed through the vast space. "We have proven this. Every day our forces win battles that should have been impossible. Every day the enemy loses ground they thought was secure." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some of the representatives leaned forward with interest. "But winning battles is not enough. We need to win the war. And to do that we need to do something bold, something that we'll never expect. He activated a holographic display showing a star map. One point glowed bright red. This is Prime, the home world, the center of their empire, the source of their power. The chamber erupted in noise. Representatives shouted in a dozen languages. The idea of attacking the home world was insane, impossible, suicidal. Drake waited for the noise to die down. I know what you are thinking. The defenses around are the strongest in the galaxy. No fleet could survive long enough to reach the planet. Any attack would be a waste of resources we cannot afford to lose. He changed the display to show a smaller group of ships. That is why we will not send a fleet. We will send a single strike team. Small, fast, invisible, we will slip through their defenses and strike at the heart of their empire. More shouting, more chaos. One representative, a tall being with blue scales, stood and demanded attention. What possible damage could a small team do to an entire world? This is madness. Drake smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. We are not going to attack their world. We are going to attack their leader. They have a single ruler who controls everything, a being they call the Supreme Mind. Every order in their empire flows from this one individual. Kill the Supreme Mind and they will fall into chaos. Silence fell over the chamber. The idea was radical, dangerous, but it made a certain terrible sense. How do you know this will work? Another representative asked. What if they simply choose a new leader? They cannot, Drake replied. We have studied them for months. Their entire society is built around the Supreme Mind. They do not know how to function without direct orders from their leader. When the Supreme Mind dies, they will not know what to do. They will hesitate. They will argue. They will fall apart. Admiral spoke from his seat in the section. And who would lead this mission? Who would volunteer for a journey that has almost no chance of survival? Drake met his eyes. I will lead it, along with volunteers from every species in the council. This will not be a human mission. It will be a council mission. We will show that all of us stand together. The debate lasted for 3 days. Many opposed the plan. They called it desperate, foolish, a waste of good soldiers. But in the end, the council approved it. They had no better options. The war was slowly being lost despite all the victories. Something dramatic was needed to change the course of history. Drake began selecting his team. He wanted the best fighters from every species. He wanted individuals who were willing to die for the mission but clever enough to survive if possible. The final team had 24 members, 8 humans, 4 warriors with their stone-like skin, 3 engineers who could build weapons from scrap, 2 assassins who could move through shadows unseen, and 1 philosopher who had studied the mind for decades. They gathered on a ship called the Final Hope. Drake stood before them and told them the truth. Most of us will probably die on this mission. The odds of success are small. The odds of survival are smaller. I will not pretend otherwise. He looked at each face in turn. But if we succeed, we will end this war. We will save trillions of lives. We will be remembered forever as the ones who struck the blow that shattered the enemy. One of the warriors, a massive creature named Crag, spoke in his deep, rumbling voice. What is death compared to such glory? We go with open eyes and willing hearts. The others murmured agreement. Drake felt a surge of pride. These beings had learned well. They had found the human spirit within themselves. The journey took 4 weeks. They traveled through back routes and hidden paths. They avoided patrols. They moved like ghosts through enemy territory. During the journey, Drake spent time with each member of the team. He learned their stories. He understood their reasons for volunteering. Each one had lost something to the family, friends, entire worlds. Commander had insisted on joining the mission. Drake had argued against it, but she would not be. You taught me what courage means, she told him. Now I will show you that I learned the lesson. I will not send others to die while I stay safe on a command ship. Her second in command, cousin, was also part of the team. He wanted to honor his relative's sacrifice by finishing what he started. The human team members were all volunteers from the advisor program. Each one had survived impossible battles. Each one had proven their worth many times over. Maria was there, though everyone had thought she died on. She had survived somehow and spent months recovering from her wounds. When she heard about the mission, she demanded to be included. "I have unfinished business with she said simply. Drake did not argue. They reached the system and immediately faced their first challenge. The defenses were even stronger than they expected. Thousands of ships patrolled every approach. Weapons platforms filled every gap. Nothing larger than a meteor could get through. But they had planned for this. The final hope was not built for fighting. It was built for hiding. Its surface was covered with materials that absorbed sensor signals. Its engines ran on systems that produced almost no heat. In the darkness of space, it was nearly invisible. They moved slowly, carefully. Every hour brought them closer to the planet. Every moment carried the risk of discovery. On the third day in the system, they had their first close call. A patrol passed within 1,000 meters of their position. Everyone on the ship held their breath. The seconds stretched into eternity. The patrol moved on. They had not been seen. "Too close," whispered the young engineer who was monitoring their stealth systems. "If they had used active scanning, they would have found us." "They did not expect anyone to be this deep in their territory," Drake replied. "That is our advantage. They believe they are safe here." The closer they got to the planet, the more dangerous it became. The defenses grew thicker. The patrols became more frequent. But they kept moving, kept hiding, kept surviving. Finally, they reached orbit above Prime. The planet below was covered in metal structures and glowing machinery. It did not look like a world anymore. It looked like a vast factory. "The supreme mind is in the central complex," said the philosopher who had studied the enemy. "It is connected to every system on the planet, every ship in the fleet, every soldier in the empire. All the commands flow from that one location." Drake studied the surface scans. The central complex was enormous, a mountain of twisted metal and pulsing lights. Getting inside would be nearly impossible. "We have one advantage," he said. "They have never had intruders reach this far. Their security is designed to stop fleets, not small teams. Once we are on the surface, they may not know how to respond." The team prepared for the landing. They put on stealth suits that would hide them from sensors. They checked their weapons one final time. They said whatever prayers their species believed in. The drop pods launched just after midnight local time. 12 small capsules fell through the atmosphere toward the enemy planet. Half were decoys designed to draw attention. The other half carried the strike team. Drake felt the heat and pressure as his pod screamed through the air. Through a small window, he could see the alien world rushing up to meet him. In a few minutes, he would either be on the surface or dead. The pod hit the ground hard. Drake was thrown against his restraints, but the suit absorbed most of the impact. He opened the hatch and climbed out into a nightmare landscape of metal and smoke. The others were landing nearby. He counted heads as they gathered. 22 out of 24. 2 pods had been hit during descent. 2 more team members lost before the mission truly began. There was no time to mourn. They had work to do. The journey to the central complex took 6 hours. They moved through tunnels and maintenance shafts, avoiding the soldiers who marched everywhere in perfect formation. The philosopher guided them, reading the alien signs and understanding the enemy patterns. They encountered guards twice. Both times the assassins handled the problem before anyone could sound an alarm. The soldiers died silently, never knowing what killed them. As they got closer to the complex, the defenses grew stronger. Sensors covered every surface. Guard posts appeared at every junction. The team moved slower and slower, finding narrower and narrower paths through the security. "There," whispered, pointing to a massive door that pulsed with strange light. "Beyond that is the chamber of the Supreme Mind." Drake looked at the door. It was sealed with locks that seemed to have no visible mechanism. Around it stood 20 soldiers in heavy armor. "Ideas?" he asked. Stepped forward. Distraction. Half of us draw the guards away, the other half breaks through the door. "Can we break through that door?" The engineers examined it from a distance. "We can try, no guarantees." "Then that is what we do. Take half the team and create chaos. Make as much noise as possible. Draw every guard in the area to your position." Nodded. "What about our escape?" Drake met her eyes. "There may not be an escape, you know that." "Yes, I know." She gathered her group and moved into position. Drake watched her go, knowing he might never see her again. The distraction began with an explosion that shook the walls. Then came weapons fire and screaming. The guards at the door reacted exactly as hoped. Most of them ran toward the noise. Only 5 stayed behind. Drake and his team attacked. The battle was brief and brutal. The warrior Crag grabbed 2 guards and crushed them together. The humans took down the others with precise shots. In 30 seconds, the door was clear. The engineers went to work. They attached devices to the door and began making adjustments. The rest of the team formed a defensive perimeter, watching for reinforcements. "Hurry," Drake said. He could hear more fighting in the distance, and her team were still alive, but they could not last forever. "Almost there," one of the engineers replied. "The lock is complex but not unbreakable. Give us 2 more minutes." Those 2 minutes felt like hours. Guards began appearing from other directions. Drake and his team fought to hold them back. Bodies piled up in the corridor. The door opened. Beyond it was a vast chamber filled with lights and machines. In the center, suspended in a web of cables and wires, was the Supreme Mind. It was not what Drake expected. It was not a creature or a being. It was a brain. A massive organic brain the size of a house, floating in liquid and connected to everything. "Destroy it," Drake ordered, "now." They fired everything they had: explosives, energy weapons, physical projectiles. The brain shuddered and writhed. The cables sparked and burned. Alarms screamed throughout the complex. "It is dying," said. There was awe in his voice. "The Supreme Mind is dying. I can feel the commands stopping, the connections breaking. The Empire is falling apart." Drake kept firing until his weapon was empty. The brain had stopped moving. The lights were going dark one by one. The Supreme Mind of the was dead. "Mission complete," he said into his communicator. "All teams retreat if possible. We did it." Static answered him. He did not know if anyone heard. He did not know if anyone was still alive to hear. The escape was chaos. The soldiers on were confused and directionless without the Supreme Mind to guide them. Some fought with fury. Others stood still, not knowing what to do. Some actually fought each other, different factions disagreeing on how to respond. Drake led his remaining team through the chaos. They fought their way back to the surface. They reached their emergency extraction point just as a council rescue ship arrived. It was not supposed to be there. The odds of rescue had been almost zero, but someone had sent help anyway. As the ship lifted off and escaped the planet, Drake looked down at the chaos below. The Empire was collapsing before his eyes. Ships were firing on each other. Communications were breaking down. The perfect unity that had made them unstoppable was shattering. "We did it," said. She was wounded and exhausted but smiling. "We actually did it." Drake nodded. They had lost 12 team members, was alive but badly injured. Crag had given his life holding a corridor so others could escape. Half the engineers were dead. But the Supreme Mind was gone. They would never recover. The war was not over. There would be more battles, more death, more sacrifice. But the outcome was no longer in doubt. The galaxy would survive. And everyone would remember who made it possible. Not just humans, not just the Council species. Everyone who had fought and died for something greater than themselves. The final hope had lived up to its name. Against all odds, hope had triumphed. Drake closed his eyes and allowed himself to rest for the first time in months. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, in this moment, they had won. The galaxy was safe. Humanity had proven itself, and they had learned the terrible truth about their enemy. Some weapons could not be defeated, some spirits could not be broken, some hope could not be killed. And when such things stood against you, no matter how strong you were, you would fall. The death of the Supreme Mind changed everything, but it did not end the war immediately. The Empire shattered into a dozen factions, each one led by a regional commander who wanted to become the new leader. They fought each other as much as they fought the Council, but they still had thousands of ships and millions of soldiers. The war continued. Drake spent 3 months recovering from the mission too. His wounds healed slowly. The doctors said he was lucky to be alive. He did not feel lucky. He felt the weight of every person who had died under his command. Commander recovered in the bed next to his. Her injuries were worse than his, but her will was stronger. She was walking before the doctors allowed it. She was planning the next campaign before she could hold a weapon. "They are retreating everywhere," she told Drake one afternoon. "Without the Supreme Mind, they cannot coordinate their fleets. Our forces are pushing them back system by system." "But they will not surrender," Drake said. He had studied the enemy long enough to know their nature. Even broken, they will fight. Pride will not let them accept defeat. "Then we must defeat them completely. We must show them that resistance is hopeless." Drake nodded. He knew what was coming. The final battle. The last confrontation that would decide the fate of the galaxy. It was approaching fast. The factions eventually stopped fighting each other. A new leader emerged from the chaos. He called himself the Successor, and he united the remaining forces under his command. He was not as powerful as the Supreme Mind, but he was determined to avenge the old leader's death. The Successor gathered every ship and soldier still loyal to the cause. He assembled an armada of 1,500 vessels at the edge of Council space. Then he sent a message. "Face us in battle. Bring everything you have. Let us end this war with one final fight. The winner takes everything. The loser is destroyed forever." The Council debated for days. Many wanted to refuse the challenge. They had the advantage now. Why risk everything on a single battle? Drake addressed the assembly. His body was still healing, but his voice was strong. "We have to accept, not because it is smart, but because it is right. The challenge is about honor. If we refuse, they will think we are cowards. They will keep fighting for years, hoping we will eventually make a mistake." He paused and looked around the chamber. "But if we face them and win, we break their spirit completely. They will know that even at their strongest, they could not beat us. They will know that there is no hope of victory. And then, finally, they will stop fighting." Admiral stood to speak. He had become a fierce supporter of human methods since. "I agree with Colonel Drake. We must end this properly. The galaxy deserves peace. Our children deserve to grow up without the shadow of war over their heads. Let us finish this." The vote was close, but in the end the Council agreed. They would accept the challenge. The final battle took place in a system with no name, just a number on star charts. The Council assembled everything they had. 2,000 ships from 100 different species, the largest fleet in the history of the galaxy. Drake was given command of the human contingent. 300 ships crewed entirely by humans. Earth had sent everything they could spare. This was the moment humanity would prove itself forever. Commanded the fleet from the flagship Eternal Victory. She had recovered enough to lead, though she still walked with a limp. Her officers had begged her to stay behind. She refused. "I started this journey as a defeated commander waiting to die," she told Drake before the battle. "Now I will end it as a victor. I owe that to everyone we lost along the way." The two fleets faced each other across 1,000,000 kilometers of empty space. The Armada was a wall of black ships bristling with weapons. The Council fleet was a rainbow of different designs and colors, each species contributing their best. The successor sent one final message. "This is your last chance to surrender. Give us the humans who killed the Supreme Mind and we will spare the rest." Drake replied for the Council, "Come and take them." The battle began with a roar of engines and weapons fire. The two fleets crashed together like waves meeting in a storm. Ships exploded. Debris filled the void. Death was everywhere. Drake commanded from the bridge of the ship Earth's Pride. He watched the tactical display and gave orders with calm precision. Years of combat had taught him to stay focused even in chaos. They fought with desperate fury. They knew this was their last chance. If they lost here, their empire would collapse forever. They held nothing back. But the Council forces had something that did not. They had unity. They had hope. And they had the human spirit that refused to accept defeat. The turning point came 3 hours into the battle. The commander sent his heaviest ships against the center of the Council formation. It was a brutal strategy meant to break through the line and split the fleet in two. Drake saw it coming. He gathered the human ships and moved to intercept. "All human vessels," he commanded, "form around me. We stop them here." 300 ships positioned themselves directly in the path of the assault. They were outnumbered and the math said they should lose. But math did not account for human stubbornness. The heavy ships slammed into the human formation. The battle became a grinding fight at point-blank range. Ships traded fire so close they could almost touch. Humans died by the thousands, but they did not retreat. They held their ground and fought with everything they had. Ship was destroyed, but she escaped in a pod and was picked up by another vessel. She immediately took command and kept fighting. Who had grown from a nervous young officer to a skilled captain, led a squadron against a dreadnought 3 times his size. He lost 4 ships but destroyed the dreadnought in the end. One by one, the human ships fell. 200 became 100. 100 became 50. 50 became 20. But they held. They stopped the assault in its tracks. The enemy heavy ships could not break through. Drake's ship was badly damaged. Half his crew was dead. One engine was gone. Life support was failing. He kept fighting. "Admiral," he said into the communication system, "now is the time. Hit them from the side while they are focused on us." Had been waiting with the reserve fleet, 500 ships that had stayed out of the main battle. Now they struck at the flank with full force. The enemy formation shattered. Ships that had been pressing forward suddenly had to turn and defend themselves. The coordinated assault became a chaotic mess. Saw the opportunity and attacked from the other side. The ships drove deep into the line, aiming directly for the successor's command vessel. The successor tried to rally his forces. He called for reinforcements that did not exist. He demanded counterattacks that could not happen. For the first time, they were truly losing. Drake watched from his dying ship as the enemy fleet broke apart. Some vessels surrendered. Others tried to flee. A few fought to the death, but organized resistance was over. The successor's ship was surrounded by vessels. Gave him one chance to surrender. He refused. The ship exploded in a ball of fire. The leader of they was dead. The war was over. The celebration lasted for days. Across the galaxy, beings of every species sang and danced and wept with joy. The nightmare that had haunted them for years was finally finished. Drake did not celebrate. He sat in a medical bay, looking at the list of the dead. 8,000 humans had died in the final battle. Thousands more had died throughout the war. Each name was a person with a family and dreams and a life cut short. Found him there on the 3rd day after the victory. "You should be celebrating," she said. "You are a hero. The entire galaxy knows your name." Drake shook his head. "I do not feel like a hero. I feel tired." Sat beside him. She understood what he was going through. She had felt the same weight many times. "What you did was necessary," she said gently. "Without you, without your people, we would all be dead. The would have conquered everything. Trillions of lives would have been lost." "I know, but it does not make the grief any easier." They sat together in silence for a long time. Two warriors who had seen too much death. Two friends who had found each other in the darkness of war. "What happens now?" asked eventually. Drake thought about the question. "We rebuild, we heal, we try to create something good from all the suffering." "And humanity, what will happen to your people?" Drake smiled slightly. "We go home, we tell our children about the war, we try to remember the lessons we learned here. The galaxy will not forget you. The council will not forget you." "I know, that is what worries me sometimes." Looked at him with confusion. "Why would that worry you?" Drake stood and walked to the window. Outside, he could see repair ships working on damaged vessels. Life continuing despite everything. Before the war, humanity was unknown. We were a small species on a small planet just beginning to explore the stars. Now everyone knows us. Everyone has opinions about us. Some see us as heroes. Others may see us as dangerous. He turned back to face her. "We showed the galaxy what humans can do when we fight. We showed them our creativity, our stubbornness, our refusal to surrender. These are our strengths, but they can also make others afraid." Nodded slowly. "You are worried about the future, about how other species will treat humanity now that they know what you are capable of." "I am worried about everything. That is what soldiers do when the war ends. We worry about what comes next." The formal ceremony took place 1 month after the final battle. Every species in the council sent representatives. They gathered in the great chamber where Drake had first proposed the mission to. Drake stood before them wearing a new uniform. His wounds had healed. His hair had turned gray during the war, but his eyes were still sharp and bright. Ambassador spoke first. "We gathered here years ago to ask humanity for help. We were desperate. We were dying. We did not know if anyone could save us." He turned to face Drake. "We asked you what your secret was, how you survived when others fell. You did not answer us directly. You said we would have to see for ourselves. Now we have seen." The chamber was completely silent. Every being listened intently. "Humanity's weapon is not technology. It is not tactics. It is not even your famous stubbornness, though that is certainly part of it." Paused for a long moment. "Your weapon is your spirit, the thing inside you that refuses to accept defeat, the thing that makes you stand up when falling down makes more sense, the thing that makes you sacrifice yourselves for strangers you will never meet." He walked down from his podium and stood before Drake. "We cannot copy this weapon. We cannot buy it or build it, but you have shown us that we can learn it. You have inspired billions of beings across the galaxy to find that same spirit within themselves. That is your greatest gift to us. Not victory in war, but the knowledge that victory is always possible if we refuse to give up." Drake felt emotion rising in his chest. He had not expected this. He had expected medals and speeches. He had not expected understanding. "Thank you," he said simply. "But the victory belongs to everyone who fought, humans and all the others. We won together." "Yes," agreed. "We won together, and that is perhaps the most important lesson of all. Alone, any species can fall. Together, we are unstoppable." The ceremony ended with the council offering humanity a permanent seat. No longer observers or visitors, full members with equal voice and vote. Earth accepted the honor with humble pride. Drake returned home 3 months later. He had spent years away from the planet of his birth. The blue oceans and green continents looked beautiful from orbit. He had forgotten how beautiful. A shuttle took him down to a landing pad in New York, not far from where the first ship had landed years ago. A crowd was waiting, thousands of people cheering and waving flags. He walked through the crowd slowly, shaking hands and accepting gratitude. He saw children looking at him with wonder in their eyes. He saw veterans who understood what he had been through. He saw a world that had been changed forever by its contact with the galaxy. At the edge of the crowd, he spotted someone familiar, an old woman in a wheelchair, attended by a young nurse, his mother. She was 83 years old and had watched every report from the war with fear and hope. Drake walked to her and knelt beside the wheelchair. No words were necessary. She simply reached out and touched his face, feeling the new lines and scars that war had left there. "You came back," she whispered. "I promised I would," he replied. They stayed like that for a long moment while the crowd celebrated around them. A soldier who had saved the galaxy, a mother who had never stopped believing. Later that night, Drake stood alone on a balcony overlooking the city. The lights of New York sparkled below him. Somewhere up there, beyond the clouds and the atmosphere, the galaxy was continuing. They were rebuilding. The other species were returning to their lives. The war was becoming history. He thought about everything that had happened. The battles, the deaths, the victories, the friendships formed with beings he had never imagined meeting, the lessons he had learned about courage and sacrifice and hope. Humanity had been tested and proven worthy. They had shown the galaxy what it meant to be human, and in doing so, they had discovered something about themselves. The universe was vast and full of dangers. There would be other threats, other challenges, other moments when everything seemed lost. But now humanity knew they could face anything, not because they were stronger or smarter than everyone else, but because they carried within them a fire that could not be extinguished, a determination that could not be broken, a hope that could survive any darkness. That was humanity's true weapon. That was what made them dangerous, and that was what would carry them forward into whatever the future held. Drake smiled and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there was probably doing the same thing, looking at the sky and thinking about all they had shared, all they had lost, all they had gained. The war was over, peace had come, but the story of humanity was just beginning. And it would be a story worth telling for 1,000 generations to come. The galaxy had learned to fear humanity. They had also learned to love them, and in the end, that was all that mattered. Because the most dangerous weapon in the universe was not a bomb or a ship or an army. It was a species that could not be conquered, a people who refused to surrender, a race that would stand against any darkness and say with one voice, "We will not fall." That was humanity, and the galaxy would never forget.